Hello, friends, and welcome back to Mastering Course Management. If you missed the last episode, go check that one out. The last one we talked all about how the slope that you're hitting into affects the way that you score and the way that you play certain shots on the golf course. Today, we're going to get into one of my favorite topics, which is scoring. So, I want to start this out with one of my favorite stats that I ever tell people in lessons, and that is when someone comes to me and they think that their score just they're not making enough birdies, they just don't have enough par breakers in order to really shoot low scores. And I ask them how many birdies they have around, and they say, well, I had two, I had three, maybe I just had one. But the difference between a scratch golfer and an 18 handicap on average is only one birdie per round. So the rest of those shots that the scratch golfer is making up on an 18 handicap all comes from those big numbers and how we avoid them. So today we're going to talk a little bit about one, how we avoid the big numbers, and two, how we bounce back when we do make those big numbers. Okay, so when we look for avoidance of these big numbers, the two things that really stick out to me with most of my lessons are penalty strokes and hitting similar shots from the same position. So we'll start with penalty strokes. That's probably the biggest and probably the scariest contributor to those big numbers and those high scores. Penalty strokes, pretty simple. Anytime that you have to take a drop, anytime that you have to re-tee a golf ball, anything where you are adding strokes to your score without actually hitting the golf ball. So the big way to avoid these, if you remember back to one of our first videos in this whole series, we talked about aiming, playing away from trouble, taking one side of the golf course away. That is the main solution here. So just to touch on it briefly for those who didn't see, when we're trying to take one side of the golf course away, we are not trying to force anything. We're not trying to play certain shots. We're going to go to our bread and butter. We're going to go to whatever our natural shot shape is, and we're going to play that, just embrace the natural shot shape and take that one side of the golf course away. If we hit the ball left, we're taking the right side trouble away. If we hit the ball right, we're taking the left side trouble away. And the way we're going to do this is we're just going to aim for something that's not in the danger, but close to it in proximity on the side that we are curving away from. And we are going to trust that our natural shot shape will take us away from that trouble. And if it doesn't, and if we hit a straight shot, we know that we will still be safe based on where we aim. So for instance, if I have a fairway bunker in the left side of the fairway and I hit a shot that curves to the right, I'm going to aim on the right side of that fairway bunker to where if I hit a straight shot, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to be in it. If I do hit my curve shot, I will be fine. I'll be in the fairway and I will have a perfect shot for my next swing. So that's our big thing with taking one side of the golf course away. Again, if you want to see kind of more in depth as to how you can kind of train this and practice this, go check out that video. It should be under knowing your swing. But the big thing with penalty strokes is we're playing away from trouble, especially trouble left and right. Trouble back to front, we can also play away from. That's all about knowing your numbers, knowing your distances, something we touched on in the first video. So go check that out as well. But penalty strokes, highly avoidable, easy way to get that score down and to avoid those big numbers. Now, when we talk about multiple shots from similar positions, that is most likely an issue with either technique or your mental game. So if we look at this kind of situation, most of the times what you'll see is this happens in the short game. This happens when you are not confident in the bunker and it takes you 2 or 3 shots to get out. Happens when you are on one side of the green and you skull the ball across the green to the other side and have a similar chip. This is just a very easy way to get the score down, is to limit these mistakes. And the best way to do that is to practice the shots you're uncomfortable with when you are not playing and to avoid those shots when you are playing. So we're not going to try to play scared. We're not going to try to play away from situations where we can be aggressive, where we can kind of have scoring opportunities, but we're not going to hit shots that we're uncomfortable with. If there's a certain club that you know you didn't really hit on the range or you haven't hit it well in a while, we don't need to hit that today. We can club down, we can play something safer, and we can just wait for our opportunities in order to, hit those shots that we want to be more aggressive with. We don't want to force our hand at all. We don't want to hit anything that we're uncomfortable with. We want to know when we are standing over the golf ball before we hit that we have the right club in hand, we're hitting the most confident shot that we have, and we are ready for whatever happens. So that's part of the mental side. With the technique side, it's a little harder to just define in a video. So a lot of times that's short game stuff, and that's stuff that you need to go take a lesson for. But The big thing here is we can avoid these mental errors and we can avoid compounding our mistakes by avoiding the shots or the clubs that we are not comfortable with on the course. Another big thing I see from a lot of my students, and one of the biggest mental mistakes that I see, is this risk reward balance or lack thereof. So, a lot of times when we're making these big numbers or trying to avoid them, it really comes down to the shot selection and how we choose to navigate a hole where our plan goes off the rails. So, for instance, if you miss the fairway and you're in the trees, the choice between punching out of the trees into the fairway through a wide gap and trying to, slice one around the trees or trying to punch through like a yard wide gap, that can be the difference between saving par or bogey and making a number that just completely derails around, ruins the scorecard. So the big rule of thumb here that I like to tell my students is we need to think about our confidence level and what we think our conversion rate is on these certain shots. You see all these pros on TV, they hit these incredible shots from every situation, but you are seeing 1% of the total shots for the day. So you're only seeing the shots that are successful. There's a number of pros who are not at the top of the leaderboard, who don't hit those good shots, who either hit the non-flashy, non, cool looking shot and just punch out, or they try to hit the hero shot and they don't convert. So we need to keep that in mind that what we see on TV and what happens in real life is often very skewed. You only see the shots that are going to be entertaining. So we can apply this to our actual game by thinking about what situations we actually think we can convert and play well. So if I'm in a situation where I can't even see the ball, it's so deep in some rough, I'm not going to pull a 3-wood and try to hit the green. I'm going to pull out a wedge. I'm going to try to advance the ball as far as I can, but I'm going to make sure that I get down there and make contact with the ball. I'm not worried about, how far it goes really. I'm just trying to get it into a short lie where I can, convert, try to save par, maybe make a bogey, but a situation where I can avoid these big numbers. So there are certain situations where it's just physically impossible for us to hit that hero shot. There are other situations, maybe the situation is you are in the rough, it's maybe a couple inches thick, and you have a wide open fairway in front of you leading up to the green. That situation, maybe you can afford to take a 4-iron or a hybrid, and maybe you can try to hit the hero shot and advance it. And if you chunk it and if you don't hit it solid, the ball's going to run out into the fairway and you'll still have a fairway shot. There's other situations where you might be under a tree, certain situations where if you hit a shot that turns out poorly, you're not going to be okay. So it's really thinking about the possibilities, thinking about the next shot, the next hole, whatever you need to do to continue to score well and try to minimize your mistakes. So now that we've talked about turning these big numbers into bogeys, let's talk about turning these bogeys into pars or even birdies. So when we talk about avoiding big numbers, it's often these big mistakes, penalty strokes, failed hero shots, hitting the shot twice, hitting a certain shot multiple times, whatever it may be. These are big mistakes that actively cost us strokes and add up on the scorecard. When we talk about bogeys, these are usually the smaller mistakes. They're usually not really anything that truly adds shots to our scorecard, but over time, these small little increments add up to full shots. So when we talk about bogeys, the biggest one is the dreaded 3-putt. So when we look at putting, the worst thing that you can do is watch the PGA Tour and look at how they're putting there. As I said with risk, reward, and hero shots, you are seeing only the people at the top of the leaderboard, only the people who make these putts. You're not seeing the full picture. So I'm going to throw a few PGA Tour putting stats out there just to kind of clear the air on what is expected from the top level of competitors. So on average, PGA Tour pros have a 50-50% make/miss percentage from what distance? Pause the video if you want, comment down below if you think you know it. And the answer is 8 feet. If you are outside of 8 feet on the PGA Tour, you are more likely to miss that putt than you are to make it. So if you are hitting a 10-foot putt and you expect to make it, you must think that you are better than a PGA Tour player when it comes to putting. And that might be true. There are some putters on the PGA Tour who aren't the best at putting. But it should tell you something that you see all these putts go in from 8, 10, 15, 20 feet, when in actuality, there are just as many people who are missing these putts as there are making them. So we've talked about 50-50 make percentage. Let me throw another one out there at you, which is the distance where it is just as likely for a PGA Tour Pro to one putt and three putt. So they're still most likely allowed or most likely supposed to two putt that, but they are just as likely to make it as they are to three tap it. So pause the video if you want to guess, if you want to take a shot. That distance is 30 feet. So when you are 30 feet out, if you're a PGA Tour Pro, you are about, I think it's about 5% chance of making it and also 5% chance of three putting it. So not too high on either end there, but it should tell you something that from 30 feet from, somewhere on the green, PGA Tour pros are, just as likely to make a putt as they are to miss it twice. So that should tell you a little bit about putting stats and hopefully give you a better expectation going into your own putting, because most of the people watching this video are worse at putting than a PGA Tour Pro. So with that being said, we're going to go to expectations. So your expectation on most putts that you have should be to put it within tap-in range or put it within a certain makeable range. So when I look at my putts, if I have a lag putt, I want to lag it within 10% of the total distance. So if I have a 50-foot putt, I'm lagging it to 5 feet. 30-foot putt, I'm lagging it to 3 feet. I'm trying to take out these three putts and trying to maximize my chance of converting two putts. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm putting for par or birdie. I'm going to try to two putt all these putts. I'm not trying to be more aggressive if I have a putt for par or if I have a putt for birdie. Some people do it either way, but it doesn't matter. What we need to do is think about this in a rational way, treating the same distance putt the same in every situation. It's very hard to do, but if you get good at just thinking about your expectations for these longer putts, it will help you lower the scores when you don't try to be as aggressive trying to chase birdies or chase par saves. So now we're going to get into poor shot selection. So usually this won't be super apparent and won't cost you, strokes on the scorecard, but this over a course of a round will add up to a higher score. So when you're looking at poor shot selection, the biggest thing is clubbing yourself incorrectly. So a lot of pros have their caddies, and they do a really good job of knowing their exact distance and hitting a shot to an exact distance that they want. Now, amateurs don't have this luxury. They don't know how far they hit the clubs that they have in their bag, and the ones that do often misjudge which clubs go which distance. So about probably 80 to 90% of amateurs miss greens short more than any other direction. And that is because they either have a poor idea of how far they hit the ball, or they just don't hit the ball solid every time and they know how far they hit the ball solid. So like we talked about in knowing your distances in the first episode of Mastering Course Management, the big thing with shot selection is getting an accurate representation of how far you hit the ball in different weather, in different situations, different lies. All these things add up to how you are going to hit the ball on the course. So if you hit the ball 150 yards with your 9-iron on the range, you're not going to hit it 150 yards from a fairway bunker or from the rough. So keeping these expectations in mind, both with putting and shot selection, will really help you to take these bogeys out of play and start to make pars and even convert on these birdies. So that's going to conclude the scoring that we're going to talk about today with Mastering Course Management. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, stay tuned for the next one. Leave any questions you have in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on scoring, on kind of what you think the biggest issue is with your scoring and your game, kind of which category you fall more into as to if you try to avoid big numbers or bogeys. And as always, let's play for par.